Welcome to The Maker's Playbook, the podcast where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, Rebecca Ikes-Kara. Welcome back, my friends. For those of you that are new to our little slice of the podcasting world, I publish this show 3 out of every 4 weeks. And on that 4th week, which was last week, I send out my top photography tips to ceramicists and other makers. This last week was all about how to photograph glossy glazes or other shiny reflective surfaces. It's one of the most popular questions I get asked. So if you missed it, shoot me an email at rebecca@makers-playbook.com or send me a DM on Instagram at The Maker's Playbook and I'll send it your way. But enough housekeeping. I have a great conversation in store for you today with our 2nd episode ever featuring a non-potter. Ironically, I found Dwight White's work on Instagram a couple of years ago when we were both in Chicago. However, by the time we sat down to virtually chat, he jumped the pond and was spending time gaining inspiration in the UK. Like so many of us, Dwight's journey into being an art-reprenuer, his word, not mine, although I think it's a genius word, is a windy one. He's embraced some serious life changes over the years and yet continues to lean into the uncertainty of being an art-reprenuer with a confidence that, quite frankly, I envy. Here's a hint. How would it feel to not only leave a full-time job, but also take on the risk of hiring your own staff and also pack your bags and go live in another country for a few months? A few too many big-ticket items to handle all at once for most of us, right? Not for Dwight. He's rocking all of them and accelerating his successes all at the same time. But enough for me. Let's hear straight from him. Hey, Dwight. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
I am glad we were able to sync our time zones.
Same. I know it was definitely a struggle. I know what a weird 6-hour difference. So
yeah,
we made
6,
it work.
7. And it's so funny because I reached out to you thinking you were like down the street in Chicago. So tell us a little bit about like where in the world you are now, how you got there.
Yeah. So I'm currently out in the UK. I, hopped over the pond late November, actually. And kind of what sparked that, I was inspired by the place, inspired by the culture and by the people. And also had upcoming residencies that I wanted to pursue here. Obviously, the pandemic had somewhat of an impact on that, but the main goal was to be able to come here, network, because my main priority and goal is to become a global artist and really be in touch with different parts of the world. I think Chicago's my home. I love Chicago, but when it comes to understanding other people, other cultures, this seemed like another global hub.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you done much travel before the UK, or is this the first big international stint?
First big international stay. I have done lots of travel though, but have never actually moved to live somewhere for a period of time.
I'm just laughing to myself because the UK was the first place I went for any length of a longer period of time. I was there for a year, and it's like that tease into it's like you still speak the language. I'm just gonna tiptoe over here.
Yeah, it felt like an easy transition, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Where in the UK are you now then?
Right now, so I have a home with one of my high school best friends, actually.
Oh, sweet.
We got a spot in Cambridge. He's works in an area called Mildenhall.
Yep.
And I spend most of my time in London. So it was a good central location, and Cambridge is a beautiful area. It kind of reminds me of my college town in Evanston in a way.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say University of Chicago, but yeah.
Yeah.
Northwestern's got those vibes.
Either way, for sure.
Yep. That old world. I was in Newcastle, which is a completely different, if you guys want to take a drive up north.
I have actually.
Completely different vibe. I had to try and explain to everybody. Everybody's like, oh, isn't the accent wonderful and all this stuff? I'm like, you guys, this is a whole different bag of tricks.
Yeah. No, we actually did drive to Newcastle, been to Manchester, went to an area called Bath. So just trying to do things. Yeah.
Awesome. So did the residency work out? I'm just intrigued now from a logistics standpoint. Being there from November until, I think you said before we hit record, you're going to be there up until about April. So that's obviously an extended stay and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So no, Residency is not ongoing right now. Really, none of them that I was pursuing a year ago are doing much just with the pandemic and there being a lot of uncertainty. Kind of the ending of those, the plan was to have exhibits. So I have been able to make the connections through those residencies and been able to stay in contact with people here. So that's been good in terms of just like planning for 2022 and things like that. Overall, I'm still satisfied with the experience, and it's been a lot of growth, a lot of progress, and a lot of learning.
I've got a lot of questions on there, but before we go forward speaking, giving people a little bit of a view on who you are and how you even got to talking about artist residencies while you're in the UK. If you can give us a synopsis and a summary of what got you to this point and how you would introduce yourself.
How to introduce myself is I am a Chicago-based artist, or now trying to be an international-based artist, right? I am originally from Houston, Texas, actually. And so most of my experiences as an artist all kind of actually happened in Chicago. So I had a series that was called Reborn. And what that meant was really the fact that I was once one thing, one person, and my identity was pretty much solely an athlete and a student. When I came to Chicago, that all changed for me eventually. And I was reborn an artist. And that's when my artistic practice and experiences started. And I started engaging with culture and people in a different way and through a different lens. So yeah, that's me, Dwight White, just trying to be a citizen of the world.
Also, I think your parents had the foresight. Like, you have the name to be an artist because I have to say your last name when I say your first name. Like, it's got to be Dwight White. Like, it's not just Dwight.
I grew into it. It used to be like, why did y'all do that? But no, it's actually, I'm a junior or the second. Right. So it's my dad's name as well. So it was kind of just, okay, obviously we got to keep the tradition going. Right. But yeah, I always did want to ask my grandparents, what was the thought here?
Like, did you think through that?
They 100% thought through it. Like,
and your dad was like, I had to live with it. So guess what, son? You get to
exactly. It was fun childhood name to grow up with. You grow into it as an adult. Now it feels, it feels like it's a premium name now. But before it was like, okay, that's goofy, bro.
You were born for Instagram, basically. Is what
yeah.
So what medium are you mostly I've been following your stuff for a long time, but I do realize it's weird that we're talking about visual mediums in an audio only medium.
Yeah. So my primary mediums is, I guess there's two of them. So it's either oil on canvas or acrylic on canvas, depending on the time of year and the speed at which I'm working. And then my secondary and most often used canvas would be walls. So I'm also a street artist. So I always struggle with how to classify myself sometimes because I do street art, I do large format murals, but I'm also quite often in a gallery setting.
I would say that your style, it's not a different look from one to the next. And I think that's really impressive in terms of scale and scalability to be able to resonate and replicate your look and your style, whether it be on the side of a brick building or whether it be on just some of the sketches I've seen you do on IG.
I appreciate that. That's the goal, right? To, keep it, for it to be recognizable, have some sort of ownable asset to your art as well, so that it's really authentic and you, no matter what scale it's at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if I'm really interested in the fact that you're claiming this kind of international, stumbling over my words, you're already thinking bigger, right? Like, I have this tendency to immediately think, if this doesn't work, it'll be okay I'll be happy if it's just this or just that. And so I'm always really intrigued by that mental process of, no, let's go way bigger than what most people think about doing. And what is that a little bit, how did you come about that, I guess is where I'm going with that.
I feel like I just got a little taste of other parts of the world. And when I did, it just sparked a lot of curiosity and a lot of questions for me. Like, why not engage with people that are even less like me, even beyond just race and ethnicity, right? Like, there's people around the world that I have zero understanding of simply because I've never been there. So for me, I think that's what it was. It was like, I love creating. I love having impact on communities. And it wasn't enough for me to only impact one community, although there's always enough work to do in one community. But it's like, how do I leave a blueprint and actually start to find fulfillment in life beyond just the spaces I was told I was allowed to create within?
That word allowed really hits, I feel like. But the other piece I was thinking of is Chicago is shockingly lacking for, I don't want to say lacking because there's so many great public art. There's so many great pieces of public art in Chicago, but at the same time, when you compare it to a place like LA or even London or Philly, like Philadelphia, it has so much more mural culture where you think, man, you could, and really in Chicago, I feel like that's kept to certain pockets of the neighborhood. And what I saw you being able to transcend outside of pocket, like Pilsen has a ton of great work, but then being able to do your work down at, is there a piece you did close to like the Renaissance, like down, like off Wacker?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that was during the whole mural movement, like during the Black Lives Matter movement. It was like, yo, like right now, people are boarding up their windows. They're creating canvases, basically.
Right.
I mean, at least that's how we saw it, right? If I go back to the word aloud, you can't just be like, I'm going to paint a mural on Wacker.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of permissions and a lot of things that have to go through the city in order to do those things. But for the first time, artists were able to talk directly with the local businesses. Like, hey, like, do you want to be a part of what we have going on? We have a message to share. Would you be willing to allow us to utilize this canvas? Like right now, your building looks hideous. It has a board on it. Like, let's spice it up. I think that was a big moment for artists because it was like there's people that don't go beyond the Loop or don't go beyond Riverside within Chicago that never will see those murals. So it's like now you're actually having an influence or spreading a message to people that otherwise would never see it.
This is the thing that I've been thinking about a lot, ironically, this last week this entire conversation is not scripted. We didn't anticipate this subject at all, but I watched I watched the Miles Davis documentary on Netflix recently, thanks to, actually another Potter referred it to me. And it dawned on me as you're watching these images of Miles working with some composers who are like your classical white guy composers of the 60s that in so many ways, the arts have been this space where people are actually pushing forward what needs to happen before any other space. But yeah, I mean, as an observer walking around in the Loop, the thing I felt too was the businesses that said yes to those murals then took what was really a very off-putting physical barrier, right? This plywood that was saying, we don't trust you and we think people are going to damage things and all this stuff, and all of a sudden made it an opportunity to be a part of a movement rather than to be this physical blockade.
Right.
That was just my...
Yeah. I mean, like at the end of the day, that is a decision to make, right? Like you can say, like, I want what some would view as graffiti, right? Some are like, oh, that's not... Is that a match with my brand? Does my brand represent the streets? No, a lot of their brands don't. But in reality, like those boards are keeping the streets away from your business. Like the only welcoming thing about those boards is going to be if you can put some color on them.
Yep.
Because like those look like for lack of a better term, it look like a fuck you to the street.
Totally. So, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that it maybe became more important. Like at the end of the day, people wanted to protect their properties and things like that. But yeah, how do you become one with the street as people are walking by protesting? Like, can you at least somehow connect to them? So now when I walk by the Renaissance Hotel, it's like, oh, okay, like you're at least speaking my language. There's the message there, regardless if we can enter the space or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And now coming up on a year later, some of those boards are still up. People have reopened shops, but they've kept one panel or something. So at least hope the idealistic hope being that they're recognizing this wasn't just a performative flash in the pan, an event that happened last summer and now it's over and done with, that this is still an ongoing thing.
Yeah, which it was for some, right? But the fact that it is still ongoing, that there are still organizations that are pushing the culture forward and pushing for these local businesses, all right, do more. Like that was a board. Now let's put something or collaborate with those artists to do something that's more campaign based or more thoughtful, that's going to have a lasting impact. So
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, jumping backwards again, you mentioned this Reborn series was the beginning of your movement into art. Talk to me a little bit about how that came about or what that was for you in that time.
For me, art came to me in in a very unexpected way, I would say. So, I was playing football at Northwestern, and my third year there actually had a sudden injury that, long story short, was going to keep me from continuing my football career or pursuing anything professionally. So at that point, I felt like I lost a big part of my identity. I was like, okay, let's shift the focus a little bit. Let's start thinking about other things as you're depressed. I mean, I can look back and recognize that now, right? And I was like, man, like, what are some things that actually brought me joy and happiness and inspired me growing up? And I was like, art was cool. If I thought back, even during my college experience or high school experience, I was like the one athlete who I would sketch something like, don't catch me bored in a meeting, or I was creating, or I was teaching myself Photoshop or Illustrator. It was always there, just never had the time or had made the time. And so once that big part of my life, athletics, was taken away from me, then the time was there. And it was like, all right, let's dig into this thing. Not because I thought it was going to become a career. It was more so because it's the one thing that's therapeutic, made me happy, and brought me some sense of joy. And so that's what Reborn meant for me. It was really the transition from the life of an athlete to the life of an artist. But there was obviously a bunch of stuff that happened in between there. It was like a transitional process. I was like, oh, now I need to get another degree in marketing so I can be like a marketer. That's a little bit more creative than just studying, psychology or sociology. So I was like, all right, so I'm gonna hop into marketing. And so I hop into marketing, and I'm like, yeah, this is cool. I get into insights because that's more connected to people, and I love studying people. That's how I create, right? Eventually I was like, man, none of this is fulfilling enough. Like, I'm learning a lot. Once I started realizing I wasn't happy because there was this other thing, there was other factor. It was being a full-time artist, diving into my craft. So that was Reborn to me. It was just going from one point of life and redefining and rebirthing myself again as a completely different person and into a new career field.
So timeline-wise, was Reborn after undergrad?
The actual series itself? Yeah, it was after undergrad. So Reborn, when I was in undergrad, I was literally just like figuring out the process of painting, I think. So yeah, the series, the Reborn show was Art Basel 2019. So that was only a couple years ago.
Wait, so this has only been, that's insane to me. I thought, like, my brain in the timeline, like, I was assuming we were roughly the same age, to where I was like, okay, yeah, like, you had this massive thing happen, which changed your world in undergrad, but that was like a decade ago, and now you're doing this thing. Okay, hold on.
Yeah,
we need to talk more about timeline.
Undergrad was almost 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, timeline's not like 2 years ago. Literally, it's just the show, when I finally processed all the information and started putting a series of works together, came about 4 years later.
Okay. Because I'm thinking, wait a second, everything you've now done that I've seen in all my internet stalking happened in the last 2 years? Like, hold on.
No, but last 4, roughly, I would say.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's funny to me, I started laughing a little bit, thinking like, so many of us think art's not going to be, like, I can't possibly make a career of this. And so then going into marketing, like, I got a degree in graphic design because that was like the safe, employable. And yet I imagine in a lot of ways, I'm assuming like that marketing background now has informed a ton of the growth that you've seen over these last 4 years.
Absolutely. Marketing and business is a huge part of what contributes to my confidence in being a full-time artist. Because without the skill set of understanding how to move professionally or how a business would operate and putting people in positions and roles and figuring out where I need help and what I'm not good at, all that would not happen. I wouldn't know how to delegate properly if I hadn't been in business or hadn't been managed before, right?
Right. Because you mentioned that you have people still at your studio here in Chicago. So is there like, do you have a kind of support staff team? Like what's Dwight Original right now look like as far as function?
Yeah. So as far as the function, like, of course, like, yeah, Dwight Original, like it's the thing about becoming an artist, like you are the brand, I guess. Right. So, so that's me. But in terms of people back home, I feel like I was actually asked the other day, who's your clique? And I struggled with the question because I was like, in street art? Because for me, when it comes to street art, I just admire a bunch of people. I don't feel like I feel a part of the street art community because I'm a street artist and I do that. But in terms of like being raised and growing up with a clique or a crew, I didn't have that experience. So back home now, it's like creators across different disciplines. Like there's people that in photography and videography who happen to be like my best friends. Like I've got people that are in media and social and stuff like that who I work with. I have an operations manager who I speak to every single day just to make sure I'm continually, being responsive and actually staying on top of requests and stuff like that. There's different functions and they become more important at different times depending on the project, I guess.
Yeah. And are those all kind of independent contractors that you're working with as you need them? Or are those, like having an operations manager is a whole different ballgame than I think most artists?
That's full-time or part-time, an employee, basically. So that's the one that's consistent. That is my right hand. And I would probably be struggling very much so as a full-time artist in this year had I not have made that a priority. And it was really just from recognizing my weaknesses, I would say. Organization, happens to be a weakness for some artists, right? That's not my strong suit at all. So I was like, I need to be organized, but realistically, I want to create and I can't create and organize. I'm not good at that.
And to your point, like recognizing the skill set you can bring that you can't outsource to somebody else. Unless it's making prints and duplicates of your art. Okay, that's a form of outsourcing, but like you still have to make, and there is no business without that. Whereas right. you don't necessarily need to label the inbox.
Yeah. So even for printing, like I have a consistent printer. I'm working with them for years. And that's something that stays year round. But it's when there's bigger print releases, then we ramp up and we speak more often. So it just depends.
Yeah. When did you bring that operations manager on?
Mid last year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I knew. I saw it. I'm about to fail big. I was like, I'm gonna get a lot of work and it's not gonna go well. And it's interesting, like when you think about getting a bunch of work, you're like, yeah, it's perfect. You become in more high demand. You're in good shape. You don't need anybody. But no, that's when you need somebody.
What do you feel? I feel like that takes a lot of foresight. Is there something that you feel like either a past experience you had, or I don't know what it is that kind of gave you that foresight to know, hey, this is where I need to go? Failure.
I would say like I've seen what it looks like for business to pick up. I was also doing marketing, like working my full-time career as an insights professional in marketing while being an artist for a full-time. And I think I was doing both full-time. So I was working around the clock and I realized how much I was failing because I had no organization. The only way to succeed doing a variety of different things, which now I still do a variety of different things, just not working the full-time marketing gig anymore. But in order to succeed, like there has to be organization and there has to be like a commitment to both the craft and the business. And if I was only committing myself to the craft or vice versa, only to the business and not creating, both that doesn't work. If I want to make a living off of being an artist. Right. Yeah. I just think I know that a weakness of mine is defaulting to the scarcity mindset, defaulting to it's not going to work, there's not going to be enough. On the plus side, I'm very analytical in the sense of like, how does this function? And let me figure out that, let me take apart the clock and put it back together kind of thing. But so I think thinking about hiring on a part-time person who's going to be integral to your business in the middle of a pandemic, and then also picking up and moving halfway across the world for a handful of months is just like blowing my mind around. Like, okay. Well, and that part, it was like I knew going across the world was a goal of mine. So I was like, all right. So when I hired the operations manager, I was like, all right, we're going to do this for 6 months. And it was incredible to see the growth and the progress and how our minds became one almost to where it was like, I can go across the world and I'm not worried. It still can be like a regular flowing machine. And so that's why, I don't know. I feel comfortable trying to pursue things on a global scale, regardless if like opportunities aren't just going to fall in my lap, but I'm comfortable with going somewhere for 2 weeks and the ball's not getting dropped. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned coming back to present day, so the formal residency program's not happening, but still being able to network and connect and make those relationships for the future. What does that process look like for you as far as
either the connections you're seeking out or how you're meeting people and spreading the word and getting your name out there?
Full honesty and transparency has been really difficult, right? Like, it's been a challenge. Actually, when I first got here, the UK was open. I was
There's
actually
that.
like, yeah, there were things to look forward to. I could physically pop into places and speak. Here I have an accent. So people are like already intrigued, like, hey, an American. It's like, okay, cool. Now let's talk. And when we get to talking, like, we have shared interests. I'm stepping into spaces that I know I want to be in, right? And I think what the hard part has been now, the challenge is, we went on lockdown at the start of the year, early January. And so since then, it's been, pivoting. It's okay, how do I utilize online platforms now, like Meetup? What are y'all doing? What type of virtual rooms can I hop in? Or how do I actually pivot a little bit? Maybe my number one goal right now can't be networking out in the UK, and it's more so dive into your craft right now while you're stuck inside. Figure out more systems and processes that are gonna allow you to move more efficiently. So it's been a struggle, and I was frustrated for a few weeks for sure. Just knowing the fact that I feel like I have the ability to meet and to network and to communicate effectively. But each time I make any type of connection, I value it so much more now. I speak to someone, it's not going to be our last conversation. I want to know more. I want to learn more about you. I want to learn more about the culture. And I want you to have an understanding of what my intentions are. So I've been able to approach, I guess, the few relationships I have been able to build more authentically and more genuinely, I would say. Mm-hmm. So that's been a positive. But
I'm trying to live in both spaces between street art and the gallery. Are you trying, again, pre-lockdown, right? Were you walking into gallery spaces and trying to meet with different collectors and things like that? Or more... Because in my mind, the difficulty is there's not a specific industry. Like for me with events and photography, there are networking events that are specific to the events industry. And I walk in a room and I know there's some connection with all the people in the room where you can have a conversation about whatever in events. Whereas when you've got this more general space, like choosing where to spend your time to make those good connections, to me feels tricky.
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I've never, and maybe this is an opportunity that I can identify now, but I've never been the guy to walk into a gallery and introduce myself as like this artist that they should now represent or that they should host a show for. Where I've enjoyed making my connections, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. Where I've enjoyed making connections has really been like where I create, which is in the streets or in community. So I feel like each genuine connection that's led me to somewhere else has been either through shared experiences with other people or by stepping into spaces that I don't yet understand. And it's obvious that I'm there to learn and that I'm there to create with a purpose. And so that's what I mean by like my networking. Honestly, a lot of times it has nothing to do with creating or with networking with people that do exactly what I do. It's more so creating with people that what I do can actually benefit them. There's only so much I can do for another artist. Like another artist, they have their own craft and they're already thriving. Like me telling them how to paint a stroke differently, they don't have the same style as me. So
this was similar to a conversation I had with a ceramicist recently, Simon Levin, talking about like, it's all fine and well if we tell each other what we're doing, but we all know the same people. And so me telling another potter, hey, I've got a shop launch, if that person goes and tries to spread the word that, hey, Rebecca's got a shop launch, it's like, I've already told all the people that they've told. Whereas I think Simon's example was like, if you go and tell your dentist that you've got a shop launch, now you're getting somewhere.
All right, those people are interested in art, sometimes more so than people who are in the industry or in the space.
Yep.
Like they're just not creators or not gallery owners. But I don't know, I look at everyone as like a potential, either it could be as big as a collector, be as big as an enthusiast. It could be just a supporter, a follower. Like everybody can be a part of the journey in their own way. Like I think that's why I'm so avid about connecting with people just in general, because I don't know, those connections go a really long way, regardless of if they're currently in the industry or not. They may know somebody who's well beyond out here in London that I would have never had a chance to connect with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. It's all what I'm hearing is it's always keeping an open mind around where those connections, those opportunities come from.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm trying to resist the urge to dive deep down like the analytical business, like how's that marketing work and how do those connections work? And now, so in trying to resist that like natural tendency, I have no segue to another question.
No, it's fine. I'm always open to diving deep. I'm a deep thinker.
Tell me a little bit about how I'm still thinking about this massive transition that you went through, and I don't have the same experience as you with athletics, but just that when you're so wrapped up in one identity and then you're trying to find another space. You mentioned working a full-time job in marketing and then transitioning to this full-time. And it sounded like maybe you only just like that was the Reborn show a couple of years ago. Was that part of when you left that structure of the 9-to-5 marketing?
Actually, believe it or not, left my 9-to-5 marketing during this pandemic. So it's
your risk tolerance is 3 feet above my head.
Yeah, no, I just left this past year, actually.
All right. Okay,
so
cool.
this is my full first year as a full-time artist. The Reborn show, I can say that's when I truly identified that like that's what I was supposed to be doing. I proved something to myself at Basel, I think. I sold artwork in a different space than I had previously. It was beyond my Chicago market, and I saw there was, at least national and some potentially global interest. So for me, that was a confidence booster. It also just it was a big risk for me to go there, to be honest. Not as to leisurely go there, as an artist, to put myself in the space. And I basically crafted, I got into shows like Spectrum and stuff like that are there and part of Basel each year. But then I made it a point to have a show for myself. I basically paid for it. I was just like, this is what we're going to do. And like, I want to be in this space. So I'm going to put it there. And that was a big step for me. It was like, you potentially lose a lot of money. And I felt probably more comfortable with that, knowing the fact that I was working 2 jobs. So I was like, okay, that helps. Like it can be returned as soon as I go back to Chicago and keep working in my 9-to-5. But when it comes back to your question about like how I chose street art, I didn't really choose street art. I didn't know what it was 100%. Well, not I didn't know what it was. I loved viewing it as a walker around Chicago and other spaces. I didn't know how to tap in, and I didn't know where to start when it comes to painting a mural or even how to properly spray paint. I probably still don't know how to properly spray paint. I'm self-taught in every aspect.
Right. I also was laughing because I'm thinking, or where to buy spray paint because you can't get it inside of Chicago.
Exactly. I literally had to learn all those things by just meeting people out in the community, whether they were artists or not, and being able to tell me, one, like I dove in deep into Chicago culture before I ever picked up a spray can, because I'm not putting anything on their walls that don't represent the city, right? Or represent the community in which I'm creating in. So yeah, like street art, I was actually pushed. Someone was inspired by my work on a small scale and was like, you should do a mural. And I was like, I can't do that. And they were like, no, like here, like I'll provide the supplies and you go for it. I can see it now, like you can do it. And I was like, okay, this lady's nuts, but whatever. So I took her supplies and I painted my first mural. And I was like, whoa, I can do that. So that was my introduction to street art.
Just even the like technique of getting the proportion. I can't even envision trying to get the eyeball of someone in the right proportions when I'm a foot away from it on a scaffolding, and the people who are going to be viewing it are going to be 50 feet down on the ground looking up from a passing car.
Right. Yeah, that was my biggest struggle. I started it, I remember the exact year. Basically, I was supposed to be going to Mardi Gras. I started the mural before I left on the trip, and I just could not. I was like, man, the proportions are a struggle. My color palette, I can't wrap my mind around color theory for real. What's actually, like, where I can blend. I didn't know exactly how spray cans and spray paint blended together versus acrylic paint on canvas. It's way different, like way different.
Yeah.
So I was struggling. I went on this trip and I just saw all the colors of Mardi Gras, basically, right? And I came back to Chicago and I was very tired. Mardi Gras is, an experience I might not ever need to do again. However, came back with just
we'll just leave that at that.
Right, this huge burst of color, and I was inspired. I got back up on the ladder, the scaffold, and from there, like it took me forever to nail the proportions. But once I did, everything just started flowing freely. It was a magical experience, honestly. And then that's where I found like, this is where I belong. This is what I should be doing. Yeah.
That's amazing. So what has this is an unfair question because having your first year full-time, no safety net, also during a pandemic just feels like it's wrong for me to ask the question I'm about to ask. But what has it been like?
Honestly, it's been good. I've been learning a lot. I've been trying to define what it means to be an artist, an entrepreneur, a business person. So for me, I call it art-repreneurship. And so that process alone is like my number one goal, is really defining what that is for me. And I think I have at this point, where I'm starting to get there. And so this first year it's been good because of a few reasons. I'm not just a gallery. I don't just show my work in galleries. I don't just show my work in the streets. Also, I have a marketing experience and I have experience with businesses, right? So all those three things together have allowed me to start to collaborate with either local businesses or national businesses, to where I can now step into almost creative consulting type of opportunities, or I can position myself as, we're doing a mural project together, but let me show you my insights experience. Let me tell you what consumers are thinking about and what the streets are talking about. That's what my first years look like, and that's why I'm able to be here as well. All of my connections are in Chicago. So why would it even make sense for me to be here during a pandemic? The only reason it makes sense is because we're in a digital world right now. Everything we're doing is being driven, by what you can do on Zoom calls, what you can do on a computer, and how responsive you can be, and how you can connect. Like, connectivity is still a real thing. We've managed to be connected. So that's been my first year experience, is like I've been painting a little bit less and I've been consulting and ideating a bit more.
That's really interesting. You mentioned I like art-reprenuer. Is that you said it? I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot. And is there something surprising about that for you as far as how your time is being spent? I mean, you talked about ideating more than painting. Is something surprised you in the sense of like how it's all actually working and what you have to do to make it work?
The thing that surprises me most is people still being enthusiastic and willingness to be thinking in the future like I'm thinking in the future, right? So I'm like, okay, I realize I'm always prepared for Chicago winter. I can't paint murals in the winter. That's not a thing, right?
Right.
So right. I looked at this situation no differently. It's like I physically cannot do certain things right now, but there are things I can be doing. And so the project that I'm planning, which is why I said like April and May come back to Chicago, is because people are looking into the future with me. They're like, yo, this is when murals can be painted. This is when we can have these type of events. So they may look a little bit different. It could maybe versus 250 be able to be in attendance in the past. Now there's 50. What does that mean? How do you create an experience for 50 people versus 200? Or you want it to be 200 people, but only 50 can come at a time. I'm thinking about those things, right? I think that's how I've been moving. And luckily there's other people that are thinking that way as well. Because like when the world does open, what are we providing to the people? And are we not going to be prepared to where then fall comes around, we're just now getting things off the ground and running? So right. Yeah, I'm cool with this digital communication and planning, because I know what the execution is going to look like. Well, kind of.
as much
as we can. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I think that's a really great point, because I felt, having been in the events industry for 11 years, you get into this space of just, well, this is how it works. And you just assume that that's how it works, and there's no way around it. Even thinking about you talking about networking in that space where it was a matter of you cared who was who. Like the new kid on the block, you were kind of like, okay, cool, come to me in 2 years when you've served your time, so to speak. Whereas now, in some ways, because everything has been upended, it's like the great equalizer in a way as far as access. Right. Access to people, access to conversations, access to meeting new people, where everybody's not like schedules aren't so jam-packed that they couldn't possibly give you 5 minutes of your time. I mean, like, this conversation happened because I sent you a DM on Instagram. You didn't know who the hell I was. Like, why should you have given me an hour of your time? I can't imagine that would necessarily happen if all of us were out hustling like we normally used to.
Yeah, there's more distractions in the digital world, which is like a whole nother conversation. But there's less distraction in terms of being able to make moves. Like, we're not going anywhere for real right now. So
right. It's almost like, reach out to that person. Ask. Like, what's the worst probably that's going to happen is somebody says, you hear back from them 2 months later going, oh, sorry, I missed your message, COVID. And all of us go, yeah, COVID. Like, we get it.
Yeah. And
no harm, no foul. You don't take it personally and you move on, kind of thing, as opposed to freaking out about it like we used to. Or maybe I used to.
No, I feel you. Exactly.
That's me. Now, I know this is another unfair question, being you're doing all this during a pandemic and it is all new, but is there anything right now being so new? Is there something right now that you wish you would have known or done before making this change, before shifting to just being full-time?
I wish I would have known. That's a difficult question for me, because for me, I just feel like there's always something to learn. Like, the reason it took me so long to become full-time was because I was asking myself that exact question. I think was like, what don't I know? And like, I think I can name something every single day of what I don't know. And I guess it was more so getting comfortable enough with what you do know, and just being like accepting the fact that there's never the right time or there's never a good time. Like, it's just the time is now or it's not. And I hate to like that my answer to be like, no, there's not something that that I wish I knew, because some part of me felt like I knew enough to do what I did. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, it does, especially as you were saying, like, the lead up to you leaving the 9 to 5 was that thought process of what do I not know? What do I not know? And I think you make a fair point in terms of there comes a moment where it's just like, there's no 100% you figured it all out, and therefore now's the safe time to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, if I look back, then like my number one thing would just been, it's something that I recognize, and it goes back to the organization conversation. So like, maybe I wish I knew the stresses and importance of it, so I would have done that earlier. But like, it was something that eventually I was like, this is super important. So maybe it's even less of the organization conversation and more of the identifying your weaknesses and accepting your weaknesses. Because if you go full time with too many weaknesses, you are setting yourself up for failure. So if you recognize your weaknesses and you're willing to work on them, or put either people or resources in place that are going to help you with those weaknesses, I think that's probably the number one thing that I would say I'd spend more time on before I made a leap into being a full-time creator, is identify more of your weaknesses and prepare to fulfill them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that, is there any crossover from the kind of I almost think the mental skills or even like the practice approach that comes out of athletics that have applied into this shift now?
Yeah, I think 100%. I realize it now. Like, I had a hard time connecting the two for a very long time. I was like, how did I go from athletics to art? And
high schoolers around the world are like, this isn't possible.
Yeah, like I couldn't have wrapped my mind around there being any similarities. So there couldn't be more different fields. But when it comes to how I move, and like the tenacity and the speed at which I work, or the studying of my craft and understanding the spaces I'm about to step into or arenas I'm going to step into, it has a lot of similarities. And like identifying my weaknesses, that was one thing that as an athlete, like every athlete has a weakness. It's like your job to to supplement it with something that you're really good at. That approach 100%, I think, ties into athletics.
For some reason, it was the way that you were talking about identifying weaknesses that I was like, that to me sounds like sports. That's what that is.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not as fast as the next guy. All right, what are you better at than that person?
Right. Are you more agile? Are you more... Exactly. Yeah. I think of it even also, to me, like having studied music before graphic design and the rest of the arts. And I think music athletes making a living as an artist now, all kind of ties in also in terms of these skill sets that are painfully not instantly gratifying. You know, like the grit that comes from having to try and improve a skill set and improve a craft. And you're basically, all of your training is mostly just teaching you how to find the things that you need to improve. They're not, you don't sit down to a lesson with a music instructor and they go, oh, you're doing a really great job of XYZ. Like, it's like a personal trainer. They're not going to be like, oh, good job. Like I don't have a really great example for it. Like your sprint split times are on par. They're going to be like, all right, that's fine. Let's move on to the thing you're crap at. So I think there is a lot of like mental stamina and grit that comes with it that, at least in my experience, is absolutely necessary to make a living from the things you make.
Exactly.
Well, so you're coming back in April, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Everything's hypothetical. And you've got any particular neighborhoods and stuff you've got your eye on, projects once, hopefully there's no longer 2 feet of snow by the time you're here, but I make no promises.
Yeah. Particular neighborhoods. So 2 neighborhoods is South and West Side that I'm currently working on projects there with a few different organizations. So I am excited about fully fleshing those out. Actually working on a project out in Waukegan as well, which is obviously a complete opposite part of the city or outside of the city. And that's like with a school district. So that's like an ongoing project as well, like really diving into insights with students, faculty, in order to bring Project to life out there. And then something I'm really looking forward to that'll likely happen in May is, I'll be stepping into curating for the first time. And that is, I'll be putting together a showcase that's like really highlighting Black creators, artists, entrepreneurs, and like really helping define like what that means. So I want to really focus on getting a range of creators from my level above, and even people that are aspiring to be bigger creators in the city of Chicago and beyond. So that's one thing I'm really excited about, because I haven't truly curated an experience before, at least not on a very large scale. So, yeah.
Sweet. That's big.
It is. I'm looking forward to it.
That's a whole nother like, you're just like adding to the list of, I can do this, I can do this. No big deal.
Yeah, I'm nervous about that one. It's not, I'm not doing street art. I'm making decisions with and for other people. So it's different.
And somehow unifying, I'm just making a bunch of assumptions now, but I was assuming in my brain different mediums and different, like you were saying, different skill levels, but you want people to have a unified experience at the same time of experience. How I'm always aware when I'm someplace like a museum or something, like how is my experience of this one piece affected by the other pieces that are on the wall next to it?
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. Like I want to tap into a range of creators, even like I want fine artists, visual artists, I want sculptors, I want musicians, just a wide range that all contribute to this overall experience that's, created by a Black creator and highlighting Black creators, but really it's for the city of Chicago.
Yeah. That is definitely something that I have to look forward to come May then. And in the bitterness of winter, I'm going to put that on the calendar and hold on to it, because we need like a light at the end of the tunnel that is winter.
That's what I'm saying. That'll be a great way. I was looking at April. I was like, as I think about April, my last 2 April 30th, I'm pretty sure they snowed. So I was like, we're gonna kick that off in March. I'm sorry, May.
Yeah, April is that like tease in the city where you start getting those like 50, 60 degree days and you're like, I'm going to put away my winter coat. And the moment you put away your winter coat.
Yeah, April's ridiculous. So
yeah, awesome. Amazing. Dwight, thank you so much for your time. Where should everybody check out your visual work and be able to follow along, see what you're up to?
Yeah, and my website is www.dwightart.com. And then on IG is where I post all the rest of my content, and that's at dwight.original.
Perfect. And I will link to that in the notes so everybody can just click on through.
Cool.
And that concludes episode 114 of The Maker's Playbook. Dwight has a risk tolerance built to be an entrepreneur, and I have no doubt taking those big moves before he was at a breaking point is going to pay off exponentially in the future. You've heard me say this already, and I'm sure you'll hear me say it again, but starting and growing your own business is full of tricky decisions. And while I cannot promise you that my free guide is going to give you the guts and risk tolerance that Dwight has, I can absolutely promise you it will help you put the questions that surround every single decision into perspective. So if you find yourself debating, well, just about anything, actually, you know those questions. Should I use Etsy or should I build my own website? Should I leave my 9-to-5 or should I keep this a side hustle? Should I, well, you get the picture. If you've asked yourself these types of questions, then be sure to click the link in the show notes for my Savvy Owner's Quick Guide to Smart Decisions. You can download it for free at makers-playbook.com/guardrails. And as always, until next week, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.